Hey guys, Tom here. It's been about a month since my last video log, so I just thought I'd give an update on what I've been doing with the problem of pathfinding and the grid that the pathfinding uses. So the sort of problem was twofold. The grid, first off, if you imagine most RTSs run on a grid type system, imagine like a big chessboard. And you can only be on one square at once. You can't be sort of halfway in between a square. And you move the units around like a giant chessboard, really. Obviously you want the squares to be quite small, so it gives the illusion that I can move wherever I like. I'm not bound by this rigid grid. You don't want the grid to be rigid at all, and that's the first problem. To have small tiles, you're going to have a lot of them, and if I zoom out of this map here, this map is 512 by 512 meters, which is a modest size map, I think. And I wanted the tiles to be 0.5 meter by 0.5 meter, so half a meter squared. That's so, realistically, in a meter squared block you can fit 4 human beings in. That's what I wanted. So by having a half a meter squared block, it's a decent size for a human being to stand in. But if you take a meter squared block and fill 512 by 512, you do the math, you end up with 1 million tiles. Now that is a lot of things to be keeping track of. That is a lot of things to draw. I tried drawing 1 million tiles with my beefy computer here. Didn't quite go down too well. Unity screamed at me that I can't have that many actors on at once. It takes forever. You'd have ridiculously big loading times. It just was not an option. So I went with a different idea. Based on an idea of a guy called Schrödinger, German dude, who said if I take my cat, stick it in a box with a soundproof box with no holes in it, and inside the box with the cat I stick some poisoned food, I've got no way of looking into that box. I can't hear, I can't look. There's no way to observe that cat. Is my cat dead or alive? Now Schrödinger said that the cat was both dead and alive, and didn't assume the state of either until you observed it, until you looked into the box, until you opened the box up. And I sort of took that idea and said, I want a grid that doesn't exist until you look at it. So that's sort of what I got. This grid does work. These buildings, when I place them, follow this grid. It's not as smooth as it was because they're snapping to a grid. So they all do that. The collision detection isn't quite right, but I'm sort of taking advantage of that. It's only sort of detecting its own box at the moment, the origin box. But don't worry about that, I've exploited that later for a sort of different challenge. But yeah, this grid, it does not exist until you observe it. So what I mean by that is, there is currently in my computer's memory, there is no array, list array, there's no 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional collection of any sort containing tiles. They just don't exist at all. What does exist in memory is a class called Pathfinding Grid, which has a function, a mathematical function that takes any point on screen and converts it into a tile if the grid did exist. So a tile doesn't exist until you look at it. That's the whole point. And then the mathematical function returns what the tile would be, where it would be, etc. It's hard to sort of put into words, but the grid doesn't exist. But it does, it's usable, but it doesn't actually exist until you start using it, which is great. Here's another graphical representation of that. So at the moment there are only 2 tiles in memory at the moment. There could be 1 million. There are 1 million different places you could possibly put these boxes, but only 2 are ever being considered. And it is very strict, as you can see. They snap to the grid perfectly using the maths that I've developed. And this is great. It means there's no overheads, and you're basically only considering what you need. So in the pathfinding, for example, you start with, let's say, okay, let's call the green man. This is our unit that we want to move. The red guy, or the red box as it were, is the destination. So green is the unit we want to move, and red is the target location. Why bother start considering the tiles over here. They don't actually exist inside my system. The only tiles that exist are the ones that I'm looking at, which is the start, the end, and anything in between. But they don't even exist until they get looked at, in that sense. So the challenge is, can you get from A to B? And the answer is yes. Yes, I can. I can get from A to B in many different ways. So what I'm doing is actually using an algorithm called A-star pathfinding, developed in the 60s and 70s. I think it was 68, not entirely sure. But it's sort of the de facto standard now. It's a big upgrade on Dijkstra's algorithm, which I've used in the past, because it sort of puts a weighting on the nodes that I'm considering, the tiles I'm considering, so I'm not considering the redundant ones over here if I'm moving this way. It's very good. But the challenge really, that's quite easy. You could sort of not use a very complicated algorithm for something like move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across. Can it move around buildings? That is the challenge. The answer, I'll pop it this way so it comes around this way, is yes it can. So that's cool. But again, that's quite a simple challenge. Can it do something a bit more complicated? Because there's very rarely where it'll just have to move around there for a game to work. But that's good progress. Here's something I've set up earlier. I'm going to have to change the camera angle because it's a little bit tricky to see. So, very careful. Okay, here we are. Let's stick our little man inside this maze that I've created and stick the destination outside the maze. Can, using the A-star pathfinding and my grid, which I'm going to call Schrödinger's grid because it sounds really cool, get out of the maze alive and find its way to the destination. Why, yes it can. In case you're wondering, that is definitely the shortest path that it could possibly have taken. If you're wondering whether it was maybe quicker to come out this way and come around, it only is if the red dot's a little bit further over. So now let's see, he should go around the other way. Yeah, there he is. So he's going around. Oh, and he even avoided that little obscure sticky outy bit. So there we are. I didn't actually expect to have this finished by now. I expected this to take weeks, but I've managed to do it in what, 3-4 days, 3 days. So I'm super happy. This is it. You just need to give this to units. The real test will be, can 50 units moving all at the same time following this algorithm do it and not lag out the computer like crazy. So I'm gonna have to run some stress tests, but hey, this is awesome. So this is where we need to go. I'm pretty sure this is how to do it. We've got a grid that's very minimal in terms of system usage. We've got an algorithm which is the sort of standard. I've talked to people and it seems everyone who's doing pathfinding nowadays in games is using A-star. So yeah, this is great progress, and I hope you can see the application to the game. We just got to change these cubes for men and animate them a little bit, point them in the right direction, and they'll go. And we've got ourselves a game. So that's it for tonight, and I'll see you guys later on.